Yevamos Daf Daled looks for the sources of the halachas we've just seen in our Mishnah, the first Mishnah in the sixth parak. The first about third of the daf will be discussing the source of the halacha that Yibam works with a bia bein, whether it's ba'onis, baratzim, b'mezid, or b'shogeg. The Gemara will also look for the sources of different types of onus which do not work, which we've mentioned earlier. Then the rest of the daf will be discussing the concept of hara, which is a partial bia, whether it counts or doesn't count for all other arayas, all other isurim, and the sources for each of them and what we can learn one from the other. So the Gemara begins by saying, how do you know the halacha that the bia of a yibum works to be kone the kinyan yibum, whether it was performed ba'ones, that is, they were forced into it by someone else or by each other, or whether it was done baratzah unwillingly, or was done b'mezid, that is, they were intending to do an iser, but were not intending to do a yibum, or it was miskavin, they were intending to do it correctly. In all these situations, it works. So the Gemara quotes two brises. Each brisa brings one pasuk, then switches that pasuk to something else, and then gives a different pasuk. So the first one runs as follows. It says it's learned from the pasuk that says, Yevamos Aleha ulekachalo leisha v'yivma. So it says Yevamos Aleha. The Yevama should come on her. He should do that. He's supposed to do that. So the Brisa first says that is to teach that there is a mitzvah to do yibum. He's preferred that he does yibum and not chalitza. Then the Brisa says that actually that pasuk is used for something else. That pasuk is used to teach that yibum takes place whether the mitzvah, whether the bia is performed b'mezid, ba'onis, baratzon, or anything else. So Gemara says, what do you mean? You already said that pasuk is to teach me that it's a mitzvah to do yibum as opposed to chalitza. So Gemara says, no, that's actually learned from somewhere else. That's learned from the fact that the Torah says, lo yachbot ish lakachta, then he should do chalitza. But if he does want to, and meaning if he doesn't care, if he's happy to do the yibum, then he should do the yibum and not the chalitza. This pasuk that we're discussing of Yevamos Aleha, that's to teach that onus, ratzon, mezid all work as well as shogeg. Now the second brisa runs as follows. It says Yevamos Aleha teaches that a bia kidarka in the proper place, that is what's called in the kinyan of yibum. When it says ulekacha, that is to teach it even if it's shalo kidarka in the improper place, that works as well. Now when it says, now the brisa has a second limud. It says, when it says v'yibma, so the first part of the word, not counting the hey, where it just says v'yavam, which we could have said, the entire word is extra. It didn't have to say lekacha, and it didn't have to say v'yibma. The fact that it says v'yavam as the beginning of v'yibma is to teach that bia is the only thing that can do yibum. It cannot be done with other forms of kiddushin, such as kesef or shtar. And the yibma with the hay, that is to show that it can be done bal karcha. She doesn't have to agree to all of it. Now, this is the first part of the brisa. The second part says that Yevamos Aleha is to teach bein mishogeg, bein ba'onis, bein baratzin, and all that. So the Gemara says, you already said that that's to teach, that it works, that it's supposed to be done with a bia kidarka. So the Gemara says that could be learned from somewhere else. That could be learned from the fact that it says lahakim la'achiv shem, that the point of the yibum is to reestablish, to affirm the name of the brother who died. We see that when chalitza is performed, we say that the yavam does not want to do lahakam lachav shem. That shows the yibum is supposed to be hakam lachav shem. That means that it's meant to bear children. Therefore, it has to obviously be done and to be a kedarka. Be a shlo kedarka can't bear children. So that shows that the preferable way is kedarka. Okay. Now the Gemara refers back to halacha we've seen earlier, just at the top few lines, which we did as part of the last daf, where we said that somebody who's asleep, if his guf is used to do a bia while he's sleeping, that doesn't count. That does not perform the kinyan of yibum. The Gemara says, how do you know that? So the Gemara says, because it says Yevamos Aleha, the same words, he has to actually be ba'aleh, he has to be machavin for a bia. Now our Gemara here says has to be mechavin for a bia for her. He has to know what he's doing. The Gemara later says even if he's mechavin for an animal, that counts. If he's mechavin to just enter a wall, so that doesn't count because that's not a bia. But anything which is a bia counts. Any bia of any sort, even if he didn't know what he was doing, as long as he intended that it should be a bia, that counts, and that's called mechavein. However, if he's asleep, that doesn't work. So in other words, the Kashi have a brisa that says it doesn't matter whether he's awake or asleep, it works. The Gemara says maybe it's referring to her. It doesn't matter if she's awake or asleep. The Gemara says no, we have a brisa that says both him and her. It doesn't matter if they're awake or asleep. So you can't say that it's only talking about her. You can't say when it says awake or asleep, it's referring to her. It says specifically both of them. The Gemara says there, when it says asleep, it doesn't mean actually fast asleep. It means drowsing. It means dozing off, misnam name. How do you define that? Gemara defines that as being awake but not awake, asleep but not asleep. If you call to him, he answers. He cannot explain a logical progression of any sort. But if you remind him, then he's able to recall it. Okay, next, the Gemara says we saw a halacha that if somebody falls off the roof and enters a woman in that falling motion, so he's chayav to pay 4 things. He's chayav to pay nezek, Tsar, Sheves, and Ripoy. That is, he's obligated to pay the damage that he causes her, the devaluation of her. He's obligated to pay her for the pain he causes her. He's obligated to pay for the loss of work that she can't do. And he's obligated to pay her medical bills. Now, he does not have to pay Boshis. Doesn't have to pay for embarrassing her, and that's because Boshis, one only pays if one intentionally harms someone, intentionally injures them. Here, he just fell off the roof, and if he doesn't have to pay that. Okay, now. The Gemara moves on to the next phrase in the Mishnah, which is that of ha'ara. Ha'ara is a partial bia, where it's not a full entering, only a partial entering. So the Mishnah had said that counts as a bia for all halachos, even for other types of isurim, other types of isurei erva, one violates the isur with just a partial, what's called hara. So the Gemara says, how do you know this halacha? So the Gemara is going to try to find the halacha in Psukim, where we could find the word hara, or a link to a pasuk that has the word hara, and we're going to try to see that we can apply it to all the arayos. The Gemara in the end will have one pasuk that applies to all the arayos, and the Gemara will have to say, well, why did I need all those little psukim that I came up with before? So the Gemara begins, and the Gemara says the word hara is written explicitly by a nida. It says ve'esha sheyishka v'isha dava v'gilas avasas makara ha'ara. So you see that the partial bia hara is a violation of the Isser Bia by a Nida. So Gemara says, okay, that's good for a Nida. How do you know to any of the other Arayas, any of the other Isurei Karis or Isurei Bia? So Gemara says, maybe you can learn from Nida to them. So Gemara says, no, Nida is a very strong Isser, and therefore maybe this Chumrah applies only to Nida, not to any other Isurei Bia. You see that Nida is a strong Isser because Nida is Metame, the person who does the Bia. He gets a Tumas Shiva just like she does. There's no other type of Bia that creates a Tumas Shiva. So Gemara says, so I'll tell you someplace else that you get it. You get it from the fact that in Eishes Ach, the Isser Erva, the Isser Bia of one's brother's wife, that is called Nida. It says, Ve'eshes Sheikach as Eishes Achiv, Nida he. That's called Nida. It obviously doesn't mean to say she's a Nida, because who says she's actual Nida? Maybe she's not menstruating. It must mean to say that she has the halacha of a Nida, just like a Nida has the halacha that Hara violates the Isser, and Eishes Ach Hara violates the Isser as well. Gemara says, great, so now I know Nida and I know Eishes Ach. I also know anything similar to Eishes Ach, that is, anything but just like Eishes Ach is created by a marriage, and therefore you can add as many women to that Isser as you want. So, for example, if one's is usher to his brother's wife, that brother could go marry more women and more women and more women. They all become usher to the brother. Any other Isser which was created by a marriage, the man could go and keep on marrying more women and put more women into that Isser. That's the strength of the Isser Eishes Ach and other such Isurim. However, what about something which is not created by marriage, such as one's mother or sister or daughter or anything like that? So the Gemara says, so for that you're going to need to have a different pasuk. And that is because it says the word hara in a different pasuk altogether. It says the word hara by one's aunt, by one's father's sister. A father's sister, the lashon over there is ve'ervas achosi mecha v'achos. That's the father's sister and the mother's sister. It says ve'ervas achosi mecha v'achos avicha lo sgalet ki es sha'aro he'era. It says the word hera. So the Gemara says, okay, but there the problem is that is an Isser Haba Me'elav. That is an Isser which does not involve a marriage. It's not created. It's very strong that it always exists. It's natural born. It cannot be created. One is Usher to his father's sister. No marriages are involved to create that Isser. So you can't learn from there to other Isserim which are created through marriage. Like, for example, Eshusach and the other types of things like Achos Isha, Kaloso, Chamoso. So how do you know those? So again, we have a pircha really for every type of limud. So the Gemara says you're going to have to learn from a combination of two limudim, of two sources. Two sources together, each one will prove that the pircha is not a good pircha. So the Gemara says, okay, which two sources would you like to learn from? So the Gemara says, well, let's learn from Eishes Ach and Achos Av, from one's brother's wife and from one's father's sister. One of them is a natural Isser. Father's sister is not created through a marriage. Eishes Ach is created through marriage. Therefore, you see neither of those two strengths are the strength that causes the Isser, and therefore you can include anything into those. So the Gemara says no. It could be that they both have a strength together, collectively, that other types of Isur do not have. So, for example, what would be the strength? That they're created by a relationship. They're both relatives. However, something like an Eishes Ish, just a married woman, who is not, that's an Isur not created by any relationship to the man. So there, you wouldn't be able to learn that out of these two. So the Gemara says, okay, no problem. So let me throw Nida into the mix. I'll learn from Nida and Achos Av and Achos Aim. Nida is not created by any relationship. So the Gemara says no. But Nida is not created by marriage, and Achos Av and Achos Aim are not created by marriage. Those are all Isurim that come by themselves automatically without anybody having to marry anyone. So you can't necessarily learn to Eishes Ish, which is an Isur that's created only by marriage. So how do you know Eishes Ish again? So Gemara says I could learn Eishes Ish from a combination of Nida and Eishes Ach. There, you cannot use any pircha. You can't use the pircha that it doesn't come through marriage, because Eishes Ach only comes through marriage. You can't use the pircha that it comes automatically, because they don't all come automatically. And you can't use the pircha that it applies to as many women as you want, because Nida doesn't apply to as many women as you want. So therefore, you can't use any of those pirchas. And they're also not all relationship isurim. So we have a different pircha. That's Nida and Eishes Ach are both isurim that have no heter. You cannot end the Isser of an Nida. You cannot end the Isser of an Eishes Ach. However, you could end the Isser of an Eishes Ish. An Eishes Ish could be divorced, and then she becomes mutter to everybody. So the language that the Gemara uses is that there is no heter to the Isser of Nida and Eishes Ach in the lifetime of the Aser. In the lifetime of what creates the Isser, there is no heter. Now the Gemara is bothered by this language here. What do you mean there's no heter in the lifetime of the Aser? The Aser has nothing to do with the heter. Both of them have a heter. Eishes Ach has a heter. If the husband dies without children, she falls to Yibum, then matters Eishes Ach. Nida has a heter when her time of Tumah ends and she goes to the mikvah. Neither of these have anything to do with the person that asers. So the Gemara says what we mean to say is that the husband that creates the Isser cannot do anything to end it. The Nida is ended when her time is up, and Eishes Ach is ended when he has no children. But he can't do, and he dies without children, but he can't actually do something within his lifetime to end the Isser. Eishes Ish, you can end the Isser. You can do something to actually end the Isser. He can give her a divorce. The Eishes Ish is therefore a weaker Isser, and how would you learn that an Eishes Ish is violated even by a hara, by a partial biyah? So the Gemara goes therefore to a different attack altogether. The Gemara brings the Joshua of Yonah, or Rav Huna B'Rav Yeshua, that says that there's a pasuk that links all our ayahs together. It says, "Kol sheyasim kol te'evos ha'elu v'nirchusu and nefashos ha'osos." All arayas are linked together with kol sheyaseh, and therefore you can learn from Nida to all other arayas, just like Nida is violated with just a hara. All other arayas are violated just within Issa hara. So now the Gemara says, well, then why do we need all those limudim that we had? So let's start with, why does it say Nida in the pasuk of Eishes Ach? Why do we want to link Eishes Ach to Nida? What was the point in saying that? Says the Gemara, that's to teach me that the Isser Eishes Ach is Koris. It never actually says Koris by Eishes Ach. Just as V'isha She'ikach as Eishes Ach of Nida, Hi Eres Ach of Gilar B'Yirmiyu. So the Gemara phrases it like this. The Gemara says, how do you know that there is a mitzvah of Yibum min ha-Torah? The Gemara says, what do you mean? It says Yibum straight out in the Torah. No, what we mean to say is, how do you know that in a case where there is no mitzvah of Yibum, that there's an Isser? There's an Isser between the Yavam and the Yevama. There's an Isser Eishes Ach. Says, what do you mean? The fact that the Torah tells me that you should only do Yibum in a case where you have the Yibum circumstances, where the woman is left alive after her husband dies without children, and there's a brother, so that teaches me that otherwise it's also. Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Maybe it's teaching you that otherwise there's no mitzvah, but it's permitted. Eishes Ach is mutter. Only in this case is there a mitzvah. Or maybe if I would have only had that proof, that would only be an isser that you learn out of it in asay. You learn from the fact that there's a mitzvah asay only in a case where there's even circumstances, that if there's no even circumstances, it's usher. But that's only a lav haba mechlalas. It only has the status of an asay. It wouldn't be kares. So how do you know this kares? So that's why it says needed to teach me that there's kares in a situation of an ishazach. It's not a lav, it's not an asay, it's an isser krisis. Now that therefore gives me, that's why it says nida there. Now the Gemara says though, well, why does it say hara by achos av and achos aim, by the father's sister and the mother's sister? It says the word hara there. What's the point in that? There, I don't need to say the word hara. I know that a partial bia violates the isser from the fact that all the chayve krisis are linked together. All the arayas are linked together. Like it says, so the Gemara says, so that's to teach me what Ravina said, like what Ravina asked Rava. He asked, how do you know that somebody who does a partial bia in a zachar violates the isser? So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Why is that a problem? Zachar has all the rules of bia that apply to a woman. All the surim in a female bia apply to a male bia, like it says, mishkevei isha. So says, no, it's talking about a raw in a behema. That's what we asked. How do you know that somebody who does a partial bia in a behema violates the isser? So that's learned that the fact that it says hara by achos av and achos aim. It doesn't belong there. It's extra there. So it's an eno inyan. If it's written in one place where it doesn't belong, learn it to somewhere else where you need it. So the Gemara, there's a problem with that, and that's why would the Torah put that hint in a case where it's totally irrelevant? To put it in something similar. So, being a behema is a misas bezdin. For violating that isser, one gets misa biyad the bezdin. However, achos aim and achos av, those are krisas. You shouldn't put the hint in a case, if you wanted a hint to something. In the case of bias behema, you should put it in another misas bezdin. You shouldn't put it in a chayve krisus. So why is it here? So the Gemara says, because this is special. Chavivus here, the entire pasuk of achos ha'em and achos ha'av is used for drashos, and because it's all used for drashos, we put this extra here so to teach us to use it as a drasha somewhere else as well. So now the Gemara says, what are all the drashos that you're using in achos ha'em and achos ha'av? So the Gemara says the isser of achos aim and achos av is mentioned twice. And the reason why it's mentioned is because I would have a problem. And that's, I don't know if the isser of the sister, of the father and the mother applies to a sister through their fathers or through their mothers or through both of them. How do I know that? So the Gemara says, well, let's try learning that isser. So the Gemara says, on the one hand, I could compare it to the sister of one's, to the isser of one's own as sister. One's own sister we know is usher, whether she's a sister through the father or a sister through the mother. On the other hand, one's uncle's wife, that's only if the uncle is related to the father or the mother, that is the father's or the mother's brother's wife. There, the brother has to be only a brother through a father to one's mother or father. That is, what a person is forbidden to his father or mother's brother's wife, and that's only if the brother to his father or mother is related through their respective father, not through the mother. So what should we compare the regular achos av and achos aim? What should we compare the father and mother's sister? Is that only through a father, like the case of the brother-in-law, like the case of the father or mother's brother-in-law, or is that also through a mother or sister, just like one's own sister is even through his mother and not only through his father? So the Gemara says, well, which one is a better comparison? So the Gemara says, on the one hand, there's a similarity to sister, and that's that we're both talking about sisters. That's a direct relationship without any marriage in between. So therefore, I should compare the Isser of Achoso to the Isser of Achos Aviv and Achos Imo. Both are sisters without any marriage. I should not compare it to the Isser of Achos Dodaso. Of Dodaso, which is his father's brother's wife. On the other hand, this is an Isser through the father. It is an aunt-type relationship. It is in a way more similar to a father's brother's wife, just like the father's sister, they're both relatives of the father, as opposed to achosu, which is one's own relative. So which one is more comparable to? So the Gemara says, I really wouldn't know. And therefore the Torah writes it again, and it says, it specifically spells out, achos, ervas achos imecha, and ervas achos avicha, lo segale, to say with an extra repetition that it applies even to a sister through a mother, not only through a father. Now, so that's one major drasha you see here. The Gemara then asks, why do you have to say both the father's sister and the mother's sister? Well, you have to show both of them. If you only say the one, you know the other one. The father is there's yichus in the father. There's a family relationship that's created through the father. The Torah uses the word mishpachto yigolenu, to refer to a paternal family. Doesn't have that for a maternal family, and therefore you may think that's the only Yisr. On the other hand, one sister of one's mother is a definite relative. We know who our mother was, she gave birth to you, but you never are 100% sure who the father is, and therefore maybe you would say that the Yisr does not exist there. So therefore you have to say both the father's sister and the mother's sister. All right, now the Gemara goes to the case which we just mentioned, and that says of a father or mother's brother's wife. Over there we said it only applies if that brother is the relative of the father or mother through a mutual father. They share a father, not if it's through just a mutual mother. The Gemara says, how do you know that halacha? The Gemara answers, that's because of here it uses the word doidoi. It says ervas doidoi gila. The word doidoi is used elsewhere. It's used in a pasuk in Vayikra, oidoidoi oiben doidoi yigalenu, in talking about redeeming a relative. And over there it says mishpachto yigalenu, and mishpacha, the term mishpachto, only refers to a relative through the father. And therefore we learn to hear that it's only a relative through the father.